4:20 somewhere, and right now that somewhere is right here. So hello and welcome to the Cannabis Show. I'm producer Vince, who does that much better than Ricardo, but here he is, your host, Ricardo Baca.
You're such a punk, Vince, but thank you for that anyway, and you are better than me at that. To everybody joining us today, welcome to the Cannabist Show, where we talk about all things weed.
All things.
And that is, of course, the serious marijuana news and the fun stuff as well. In fact, if you pop onto the site right now, thecannabist.co, you can read stories such as our new review of the potent strain OG18.
While it's legal in Colorado.
About the $100,000 reward being offered in the shooting of a California marijuana dispensary owner.
Sad, sad news sometimes.
And our vape critic's new review of the Dr. Dabber Boost portable dab rig.
Man, that's a name.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, man.
Vince, how you doing, man?
You know, I'm pretty good, Ricardo. We're coming right out of the July 4th weekend. I, for the very first time ever, cooked with my own homemade can of butter, and then freaked out because I realized that our pot critics were going to be the people hanging out with me and eating my first ever homemade edible. But I think it went over well. I still got to get used some of them, but they liked it. And next week, a can of flour. How you been, Ricardo?
Oh man, the can of flour. It's all the rage, isn't it?
Yeah, dude.
Dude, I'm psyched. I'm psyched to try your can of butter creation. Your cookies, that's right? You make cookies?
Chocolate chip cookies. I started easy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to still have you over the house and do a video series on can of butter and beyond. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But no, my July 4th was great. Denver's beautiful this time of year.
Absolutely.
I love, you know, no giant crazy fires started by fireworks, so that's always a positive.
Yes,
but Vince,
is.
I do think it's that time, and I'm wondering, are you ready for the weekend weed?
I've always been curious, Rick. What would you do if I said no in this point? I was kidding, brother. Let's do it. Let's get into this weekend weed.
If you said no, I would slap you, Vince. No. All right. We are starting this weekend weed in Washington State, where pesticides are being found in places they shouldn't be found in, namely fertilizers and other products meant to encourage marijuana growth.
And Ricardo, this is dangerous because growers are using these products thinking that they're safe and legal and a-okay, but some of them just aren't. And if these growers' marijuana tests positive for these banned pesticides, that could lead to holds and recalls and the destruction of pot crops worth a shit ton of money.
You know, holds and recalls, this is stuff that we know all too well about in Colorado, but...
California?
You know, California. Cauliflower. You know, more than half of the products tested by Washington's Department of Agriculture have shown undisclosed pesticides, and as we've talked about many times on this show before, the label is the law with pesticides and related products. So that's a federal law. So this is what we're talking about. If that nutrient that you're buying, that you're using in your commercial grow, doesn't have any banned pesticides listed on its ingredients, you're using it, no problem, everything is cool, but then your product tests hot for pesticides, that's on you. And as Vince mentioned, that's recalls and the potential destruction of hundreds of thousands of dollars of product. So this is a very serious concern. Now we're seeing it more widespread in Washington.
Yeah, and officials in Washington ordered a statewide halt to the sale of those 15 products, which include Safer Grow Mildew Cure for powdery mildew control, as well as brand names Humboldt Roots, Olivia's Cloning Gel, and Optic Foliar Overgrow.
Optic Foliar Overgrow.
What a name.
Elsewhere in the weekend weed, Vince, the conversation around the limiting of THC in recreational marijuana and pot products in Colorado is moving forward.
Aww.
A group of concerned citizens wants to limit the THC in all retail cannabis products to 16%. But the marijuana industry says such a cap would devastate the industry and make illegal 80% of the pot products that are currently on shelves.
80.
And with the creation of a new, well-funded coalition, the marijuana industry is now fighting back.
You know, they hinted at it when we had LiveWell's John Lord on our show a couple of weeks, and it's coming to fruition now. Some heavy-hitting members of the industry have formed the Colorado Health Research Council, which is fighting the THC limiting Amendment 139. They've collected more than $300,000 to fight 139, including a $75,000 contribution from Terrapin Care Station, $25,000 from Open Vape and Medicine Man, and contribution from some of the state's biggest weed businesses.
And you know, if the people behind 139, these citizens, if they get enough signatures, Colorado voters will decide in November on limiting the THC count, but also mandating warnings on pot packages that say marijuana's health risks include, quote, permanent loss of brain abilities,
What?
end quote. Yeah, that's serious.
Yeah, man.
But note, you know, these people, they want to limit all pot products to 16% THC. The average potency for cannabis flower in the state is 17%, and the average potency for concentrates in Colorado is 62%. And that's according to a study done by the state of Colorado. So you really are talking about a majority of cannabis products being affected by this.
Like 100% of the cannabis products that I love and enjoy. And when you asked Amendment 139's attorney, who is former Colorado Speaker of House Frank McNulty, what the thought about the amendment's potential impact on the state's pot industry, he said, quote, "It doesn't matter." McNulty said the cannabis industry freaks out each time kids' safety is brought up, and, quote, "all we've seen is their profits skyrocket."
You know, of course, we're going to let you know if the 139 team is able to secure the signatures needed to land on the ballot. But Vince, it's time to bring out our first guest of the show. And she's currently collecting signatures for a different pot proposal. She runs the Denver chapter of NORML, aka the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, and she's pushing for legal social use / public consumption of cannabis in the city and county of Denver. It's my pleasure to welcome Jordan Person to the Cannabist Show. Hey, Jordan.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. We've talked a little bit about your proposal on this show and a lot about the many predecessors to this. So public
Yes.
consumption is one of our viewers' favorite issues, and I think it's also one of those lingering issues that's just still kind of out there flailing in a market that largely has a lot of this stuff already figured out. We're going to talk about it, but first, Jordan. Sativa or indica? Where are you at on this? Where are you at?
Indica by far.
Oh,
every
by
day.
far.
Absolutely. My dog is even named Indica.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow, pet names. I love it. Okay.
Yeah, he should have been named Sativa, though, because he's crazy.
Because he's a freak. Okay. But why indica for you?
Pain, nausea, anxiety.
And what kind of pain,
that
if you don't
order?
mind me asking? Like,
Yeah, pretty much. I had several surgeries in 2010 to 2012.
oh, sure.
Very major surgeries that have left me with daily pain and nausea. And so I use cannabis every day for that reason.
Wow. And it works better than anything that you've ever been prescribed for it and
Absolutely.
just over-the-counter stuff?
I moved to Colorado in 2010 on 11 pharmaceuticals.
Wow.
And
And
now
how
I
many
take
of those
them.
are still around?
0.
Good for you. All right. Well, thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
You and your colleagues, as I mentioned, are trying to legalize social cannabis use in Denver. How do you envision this working, assuming it passes? Give us the lay of the land on how Denver NORML's initiative would work in real life.
Well, we've had a lot of different business models and entrepreneurs approach us, and the one that keeps coming up is a coffee shop or a bookstore or a yoga studio, but being able to have those places that already exist where people often will consume beforehand, now they'll be able to consume there safely and responsibly.
Sure.
And so we feel that it's going to bring a lot of different types of business models to Denver.
And so the way yours would work is it would apply to existing businesses, or would they
Absolutely.
have to be specific cannabis clubs? I guess that's one thing I
It
don't
could be
understand.
either or.
Oh, okay.
They could apply to be just a smoking club and apply for that business license, or they could apply, they could already be an active business and then apply for the cannabis club license.
Sure. And oh, go ahead. Go
It
ahead.
would allow for patrons 21 and up to safely and responsibly consume, bringing their own cannabis, no distribution on site, and each of these businesses would be able to create whatever their membership model consists of. So if one place wanted to charge $10 a day and another place wanted to charge $100 a day, that would be up to each individual business owner.
Oh, sure. Okay. But if there was an existing yoga studio, art gallery, this would apply to them.
Absolutely.
And they wanted to allow consumption on site. And then, you know, if I'm walking down the street and we pass this in November, when's the earliest do you think it could go into effect? And how, do you think that would be noticeable from street level if I'm walking along Santa Fe or 13th? Is that something I'd notice even compared to now where
With
there is no
signage,
legal consumption?
I think that if with the appropriate signage in front of these businesses, you would notice them the same way you notice a dispensary.
Okay.
I don't think that there would be any more reason that you would notice it more than any other business.
Oh, okay, sure. And when do you think it might be able to be implemented?
We're hoping the first of the year, 2017.
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, you're in that very difficult and lengthy signature gathering process. And I know we talked a little bit about this earlier. You're looking to get 10 grand signatures. You need about half that. Where are you at in the process?
4,726 is what we need. We're roughly halfway. And we are confident we'll get exactly what we need.
Oh, good. So you're halfway to the 10K number?
Correct.
Good for you. And is that primarily, you know, going out to Pride and People's Fair, hanging out in the 16th Street Mall, touristed or visited
all of the
areas?
above.
Yeah.
All of the above. Grocery stores, light rail stations, dispensaries. We have several dispensaries that have allowed us to hang out in front of them and talk to their customers. And all of the summer events that we've been having lately, we've been out and had a presence at every one we can. And there's lots of events that have actually reached out to us to include us in their events as well.
Oh,
so
good. Okay.
we've had a lot of incredible opportunities to get this done.
I'm curious, you know, this is such a large undertaking, especially for your Denver NORML, sure, but you know, I think we all know that it's not like NORML's funding you tens of thousands of dollars for this. But what's this meant for you? Has this been a major part of your life for the last months?
Absolutely, it's changed everything about my life, hands down. From the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep, I have sometimes 20-hour days, and I wouldn't change it. It's made me into an activist that I didn't know I was capable of being.
Oh, wow.
And so that's been an incredible part of the journey in itself. It's taught me a lot about the people around me, the people in the cannabis community. It's just taught me a lot in general.
Oh, good for you. It sounds like a really positive experience.
It has been.
You know, it's always fun when we have breaking news on the show. And as you know, we were just talking about this. We reported a lot on the social use proposed initiative from last year. 2015, some folks from the Marijuana Policy Project, law firm Vicente Cederberg, put forth a measure, got all the signatures, and yanked it at the last minute in hopes of working with government. Well, now those same people are back proposing a competing initiative to yours. What's going on? Now, if they succeed with signatures, if you succeed with signatures, we're going to have two of these similar initiatives on the ballot. So what's going on right now?
That's correct. I found the news out today, as a matter of fact. We had been given a copy of their language a couple weeks back and asked not to come forward with that information until they had released it, of course. And so obviously they released it today.
Sure.
So here we are talking about the news. I wish we could have all worked together, but I feel that we have a better piece of legislation, and I feel that our initiative will be the better solution for the city.
And so you just learned about this today, but surely you talked with some of these people when you first started getting into this process. They got so far into it last year. So what were those conversations like? And are you surprised to find yourself here where, hey, we talked then, and now we have two competing initiatives? What's going on?
I am surprised. I wish we could have come to a consensus with each other, and so that we wouldn't cause this confusion with consumers and with the industry at large. I feel that we had the capability of working together, but unfortunately, here we are.
Unfortunately, here
we are. And so I feel that they did give us the information a couple weeks back, and we reviewed it. And like I said, I feel that we have a better initiative.
And I want to give you the opportunity to tell us why your initiative is better. I know you and I both have only had a few minutes to read over what they're proposing, but in your opinion, tell us why your initiative is the better one.
Well, considering their language has not yet been approved,
sure,
I want to definitely preface that.
Yeah.
From what I've read, they're very focused on neighborhood organizations and taking the responsibility away from the city and focusing on the neighborhood organizations, which, you know, in Denver's history, that's unprecedented. That's never happened before. Taking that responsibility away from the city and giving it all to neighborhood organizations.
Sure.
And so that's a very big difference, and from our language to theirs. Theirs also includes that it would be open to any business model, and ours is very specific not to include alcohol.
Oh, okay, sure. That's a big difference. Yeah.
Huge difference. There are no initiatives anywhere in our country that include the mixing of alcohol with marijuana. And so we feel that in order to truly normalize the conversation of marijuana, we have to start out by proving we're responsible consumers. And that's what we've been doing here in Colorado. We've been proving that for the last few years now.
2.5 years.
Here we are being responsible. And so let's continue to do that by giving these same people that are purchasing this product to also legally consume it in a place other than a private residence.
Right. And that's a big key part of it.
Absolutely.
I remember having the same discussion last year with Mason Tavert, one of the guys pushing it this year and last year. And I remember bringing that up to him. This is a lot more liberal, out there, aggressive than so many of the existing consumption models that are out there, either legally or on the fringes, a fringe of being legal. But you know, it's fascinating that they really are pursuing this angle where you could consume alcohol and weed on the same premise. So we're going to talk with you more about this issue and some other things, but we're going to take a quick break. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us, Jordan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to throw to our very own Wizard of Weed. And of course, that's Professor Pat for this week's entry in the new Cannabist lexicon.
Glass. One of the most ubiquitous and popular ways to smoke marijuana, and way cooler than through a metal pipe. Unless, of course, you buy one of those little glass crack pipes by mistake from the gas station, then it's pretty much the worst. To hear that in a sentence, I'm dropping some big cash on a new glass piece this weekend.
Thank you for that, Professor Pat. Our next guest is also making her first appearance on the show. She has been documenting marijuana history, culture, and news in Colorado and beyond for more than a decade. I'm psyched to welcome Cannabis camera owner Kim Sidwell to the Cannabist Show. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Good to see you again.
You as well.
I don't think I've seen you since 420.
Probably not.
420 at the Oriental? Yeah, that was it.
Sex Pot Comedy Show?
Yeah. Without the headliners because they got too stoned and freaked out and discovered Jesus and went and crashed in their hotel room. And if you haven't read that story, go find it. Look up Lucas Brothers on the Cannabist. It's so worth a read.
It's still a great show.
Yeah, it was. It was. We had Sam Talent in here a couple of weeks ago specifically because of that show. I was like, damn.
Cool.
Our first guest too high to do the show for a second there.
Yeah, he lost it a little bit. Kim, sativa, indica?
Indica, for sure.
Oh, 2 indicas.
Yep.
Why?
I like the calming effects of it. Kind of before bedtime type of stony feel that I get from it. As opposed to the...
Is your mind normally pretty active, pretty racing, or your body, or...?
I'd say my mind is, yeah. It kind of just calms me to get to sleep. It helps me with my migraines as well. So the sativas tend to give me a little more anxiety than I prefer these days,
sure,
depending on the strain. But.
When I have this conversation with certain people, I always think back to some of the days in college that were just so manic that I was just a mess and I couldn't stop thinking about work the next day or homework or a paper or a story that I'd written. And God, if only legal marijuana was around then, because I would have slept a hell of a lot better throughout university. But Kim, you're a photographer, our first weed photographer, weed-specific photographer on the show. You see this culture through a different lens. And I want to ask you what it was about cannabis culture that initially drew you in and has kept you here for so long, because you've been following this story and this culture for more than a decade.
Well, initially, I'd have to say it's cannabis itself, you know.
Sure.
I mean, like a lot of people just enjoy smoking cannabis or consuming it. Kind of observed early on after I started using cannabis that it seems to be something that crosses a lot of cultures. Kind of the peace pipe, you know, concept. It's just something that draws people together, in my opinion, you know, kind of.
Yeah, sure.
You could just list, you know, lots of different cultures, various religions and whatnot that all can enjoy cannabis. It's something that people have in common, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Beyond that, as I got older, I started to learn more about the medicinal benefits and see how it could really, really help people. That's what really pushed me to become seriously involved in cannabis. You know, beyond the cultural and recreational benefits, the medical is what really just kind of drove it home for me, if that makes sense.
But the first part of that, and I think a lot of people share this with you, it's about the community. And that fascinated me, because I've been very frank. I wasn't very experienced with weed until, you know, maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and it took a legal regulated market to bring me in, because I don't smoke anything. It doesn't feel good. I don't like it. So really, I needed this regulated edibles market where suddenly I had more confidence in what I was ingesting and making that a consistent experience. But once I did, I recognized that this community is pretty outstanding. People care, people share, people are there for you in a way that, you know, doesn't really exist. There's no comparison to alcohol, is there? I mean, it brings people together, but it doesn't form a community.
Not in that way, no, I don't. I mean, I guess in a way, I mean, you've got your people that hang out at their bars every day after work and form their little bar friends.
Good
so
point.
It's in some way
Maybe craft brewing circles,
yeah,
sharing
you know,
secrets with hops.
I feel like you could draw a comparison. However, the benefits of choosing cannabis over alcohol would be, you know, very easy to state and, you know, just make it a better choice, you know. But definitely some comparisons to draw there, but I don't think that the alcohol route would be preferable, if that makes sense.
Sure. I want to talk about this photo project you put together around 420. I had so much fun looking at it the first time, because you have been around for so long, but you've also been present. You're around, but even though a couple hundred people, couple thousand people showed up to 420 specific this year, you were one of them, and you put together this kind of 10 years of 420 look that was fascinating to see how an event grows, how it changes, how a city grows around it too. But you know, obviously everything has changed in that time, specifically legalization. But from your lens, how has the Denver 420 rally changed since you've been going and covering it?
I would say for the main way I've noticed it change is obviously going to be just in size mostly. You know, it's just physically a larger event. I'd say like the main observation, honestly, has been the change that it used to feel a little more, you know, the first few years I went, like 06 was my first year, felt more like a celebration to me personally. As I became more involved in the cannabis movement, it became more about the activism. And, you know, I think it kind of depends on who's there, how they're seeing it, their own perspective. From my perspective, it seems to have lost the sense of activism that it once had. You know, it used to be more geared up as a rally. You know, people would speak on stage about political issues. That's sort of shifted to more just about the culture, just about the performers on stage. You know, I didn't see one single activist group out there this year, aside from people with Jordan's organization collecting signatures. And that was just them out there collecting signatures, you know, whereas a lot of other cannabis events of that size, you'd want to see maybe some booths from some various, you know, legalization initiatives or drug policy reform in general, prison reform, you know, all kinds of community organizations that could have been out there trying to educate people. while they still have a good time, but, you know, kind of getting people involved and active. And I didn't really see a lot of that, whereas I feel like the first earlier years, there would be people on stage, you know, started with just, you know, a guy with a megaphone first year. I didn't even know who the guy was, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I still actually don't, but...
You don't?
No, I still don't know. I have a picture of
wow.
like the back of the guy's head, and I'm like, I don't even know who that guy is. You know, nope.
yeah,
Definitely it wasn't the individual who organizes it now that I'm referencing.
Sure.
But it's just... I'd say that's my main organization, but again, from my perspective, is just the increase in size and the sort of reversal from activism focus to just the culture.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, because, you know, the one battle can be won, but the war isn't won, and I know I'm friends with many activists who say, okay, this is a good first step, and next we want to legalize this, and next we want to fix this. What are those next steps that you're passionate about? You mentioned prison reform, and slowly it seems like the federal government is starting to move in that direction of...
I mean, my main hope is to keep focusing on cannabis for now, you know, at least... Again, from my perspective, we're still putting people in prison for cannabis across the country, you know.
Sure.
We've definitely, you know, done great things here in Colorado, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I realize that there's a lot to celebrate, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having an event that's a celebration. I also don't think there's anything wrong with sneaking in a little bit of community involvement and, you know, motivating people to get involved simultaneously.
Sure.
But my main concern is that we stop putting people in prison for cannabis and get access to these patients can get access to the cannabis without having to move their children across the country, you know, to go to one specific state. It just seems kind of like a no-brainer moving forward. And I believe that, you know, with that will come a certain level of prison reform. I don't know if prison reform is really the term I should be using, but I think we need to get our incarceration rate way down, you know, and then go from there to continue improving that. I think cannabis has a lot to do with that. Ending federal prohibition would be the biggest step we could take currently.
Well,
the most realistic step,
sure.
I should say.
And the step before that is possibly rescheduling. And one of my colleagues is in the newsroom right now writing a piece on, hey, DEA, remember when you said you were going to do that in the first half of the year? Well, we're now in the second half of the year, technically. But Kim, I have a question for you. I'm always so fascinated to talk to especially the warriors, the activists who have been in this space for so much longer than so many of us. Was there ever a moment in your time here that you thought this might be turning around? Like, there's been a lot of progress made. There were some defeats as well, but here you are in the first state to legalize it, in the first state to start these sales. Was there ever a moment in the last 3, 6, 9 years where you thought this might not happen? Maybe the progress was going to stop?
We've definitely had hiccups, you know, along the way, again, from my perspective. But honestly, nothing that comes to mind large enough to pinpoint and bring attention to one specific moment. For me personally, I've always had very strong confidence that we were moving forward, that there might be a little bit of tug of war, you know. Definitely maybe a little concerned when we had some of the issues over the edibles a year or two ago.
Sure.
A couple problems we've had with, you know, some people potentially overdoing it, you know, and causing harm to themselves or others. No real proof that that was the case or not, but, you know, when the media gets a hold of something, you know, people...
Well, they overdid it.
Yeah.
You know, if you're new, you shouldn't be eating 5 times the recommended amount from the state. So they overdid it, but
and I
was
thought
it what drove them
You know, I
to
thought that might cause a problem for edibles specifically, but as far as the cannabis movement moving forward, I've never really felt like there was much threat to us going too far backwards, if that makes sense. I thought that we would be passing something similar to Amendment 64 in this coming election in 2016, not in 2012. Of course, you know, once we hit 2011 and things started moving with the campaign, I realized that it was going to be a lot sooner than I had originally anticipated. But things are moving a lot quicker than I originally thought they would. But I'm no political expert, so, you know, just I kind of saw it being 2016 that we, you know, so we got it a little 4 years earlier than my original thought would be.
I think it happened more quickly than a lot of people expected it to. Jordan, I want to bring you back into the conversation. Speaking of those edibles that Kim brought up, Denver Mayor Michael Hancock and Denver Police Chief Robert White last week blamed some of the random acts of violence that we've been seeing around downtown Denver. And for those listening and watching, some truly bizarre incidents, including one right outside our building on the 16th Street Mall, where an individual had a large PVC-style pipe that he was just pummeling anybody who was close to him with. And that's the second one in a week or two. And now you have the mayor of Denver and the police chief attributing these random acts of violence to the city's legal marijuana. Vince is going to cue this video. I know you guys have seen this, but here we have the guy running around with the PVC. After this happened, Mayor Hancock called it, quote, one of the results of the legalization of marijuana, while Chief White urged downtown pot shops to stop selling single joints. Jordan, what do you think about these two high-ranking officials in Denver making these claims about the violence and tying them to weed?
Well, first, I would want to know, is there any evidence that these people that were performing these crimes were on marijuana?
Sure, like did they test them afterward for their,
Did we
what's
know
in your
that
system?
marijuana is actually to blame for this incident, or is the person...
Hashtag pot to blame?
Right.
Did you just make a Nancy Grace reference? Oh, man.
No, without evidence, it's not a valid claim. And so to say that stopping selling individual joints is going to change things, it's kind of an interesting statement, because one joint typically, well, in most people, not that we have any studies to, agree with what I'm saying, but, there's no studies right now that show that one joint is going to make or break someone's psychosis level. And according to that video, I mean, just watching it, that person was not mentally stable. And to say that that's marijuana's fault, that's not very fair, because we don't know for a fact that it was marijuana's fault.
Right. This person could have, not been on anything. This person could have been on something else, for all we know. Kim, what went through your head the first time you saw those comments by the chief of police and the mayor?
Pretty much the same as you guys. It's almost so ridiculous, it's comical. No mention of mental health issues here, or anything that can be done or looked at in that regard. Just like blaming it on marijuana seemed kind of like them just attempting to distract from the actual problem, which is, again, I'm no expert, but either going to be maybe a lack of police presence on the 16th Street Mall, according to what I've read. Maybe they're not down there enough. I don't know. Absolutely a lack of, just general overall concern over mental health and access to treatment when people have these types of problems. It's almost difficult for me to even put into words, because it's so ridiculous. That I saw the video, of course. I'm sure a lot of people have by now. People don't typically act like that just from smoking marijuana. I think everybody knows that. That's someone who's clearly got some mental issues or is on some very different drugs. So to me, that it was just almost so ridiculous. You just have to kind of laugh.
Yeah, sure.
And, I think that when statements that ridiculous are made, I kind of shrug them off as just sort of funny because they're so ridiculous. I think that the rest of the state and the rest of the country is seeing that and gets it too. They're kind of like, oh, okay, it's because he was able to buy a joint, this happened. It's just so ridiculous.
Sure.
Like,
but
people just aren't as mindless.
It's ridiculous
about it
when
as
it's somebody saying that who perhaps you expect to be saying that. This is the mayor of Denver who has brought us in reluctantly into the legal era and the police chief.
He's always been pretty against cannabis,
Oh, I said reluctantly.
I mean, I'm not surprised to hear him say, I'm still expecting more from him about every problem he can find to blame. I believe he's going to do that. And I think that it's just, they're just digging their own hole deeper, kind of. I think a lot of it has to do with their own inability to control these issues. So they're going to try to blame it on, oh, we told you so. People know better. It has nothing to do with cannabis. It's just...
I think it's interesting because, any substance can react with any of us differently. And certainly cannabis might mix into somebody's pre-existing conditions and make them freak out in a manner that we just saw. But truth be told, we all know how weed makes us feel, and it's not that, and that's not how weed impacts a majority of the people.
Absolutely.
And so it was just a precarious thing for them to say so quickly before we could get toxicology back.
Absolutely.
It was
took a stroll through Lodo on a Saturday night at 2 a.m., you know, and then
Absolutely.
think about it. Think about the way they're putting this. It just seems so ridiculous.
Sure.
You know, okay, maybe one person, which I don't believe that this was even a cannabis situation, but even if it was, one person loses their mind on the 16th Street Mall who clearly has some mental health issues, and they're saying, oh my gosh, it's because of marijuana, we have to all kind of like freak out about it, when, you know, much worse happens, much worse, multiple times every single weekend in Denver.
Because of alcohol.
Yeah.
And you know, especially for our readers, listeners from out of town, I definitely want to let you know, 16th Street Mall is like a pedestrian thoroughfare that runs down the middle of Denver. It's kind of cheesy, it's kind of touristy, but it is what it is. Another thing that's interesting about this story is that we and other media outlets reported months ago that cannabis was legitimately increasing homeless populations at various shelters throughout the state. And one of my colleagues, Joel Warner, for the International Business Times, did a deeper dive into that last week, and his findings were fascinating. I mean, weed is bringing a lot of people to Colorado, people with jobs, people with skill sets, people with money to buy a home, but also people who are not, who are maybe spending their last couple dollars to get the bus ticket, to hop a train, to get here. And, you know, that's one of Hancock's points. So I do want to at least shout out to that, because he's, even if he's not saying that that person was on acting crazy because they were on doing marijuana, he's saying that some of these undesirables, some of these you know, homeless folks are coming here because of the weed. And do you guys have any take on that? I think that's an interesting part of the conversation.
I could certainly see, you know, the potential for it to increase the population in that way, and
Sure.
that may be the case. I just don't see any benefit in trying to have that discussion when it relates to prohibiting marijuana, as if it's any reason why we should not legalize it.
Sure.
It just seems kind of silly. We should, you know, arrest people, put people in prison, keep them from, you know, getting good jobs, attaining scholarships, ruin their future for using a harmless plant because of these little issues that can easily be dealt with. You know, we need to increase our resources for the homeless, you know. It just seems sort of like we're looking in the wrong direction with these problems. We're, you know, can acknowledge a problem, but addressing it in the wrong way. Oh, it's marijuana's fault that we have this increase. No, instead of what can we actually do to fix it, actually do to change things, you know.
And it's good to see some of these communities putting these excess cannabis tax dollars toward homeless help. As you said, funding the homeless. The city of Aurora, one of the biggest cities in the state, as well as Pueblo, have both put a significant chunk of change from their marijuana tax levies toward at least helping homelessness in their communities. So
And
that's
you see
exciting.
the difference too. Just driving through those different cities in comparison to Denver, you can see that difference.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm not sure if I know those were both relatively recent, but if they've already started pushing those monies out,
At least there's less that I've seen.
Yeah. Sure. I think it's going, anytime you pump money into those kinds of situations, it's going to help. And so I hope it does.
I hope so too.
You guys were going from this very serious conversation to a very silly quiz, okay? This is a marijuana current events quiz. This is the pot quiz, and here's how it works, okay? We're starting with you, Jordan, and if you get the answer wrong, Kim can steal the point, vice versa. So, are you guys ready?
Sure.
Jordan, name the state that became the first state to legalize medical marijuana through the legislative process 16 years ago.
California.
Good guess, but no. Kim?
I was going to say the same thing.
16 years ago. That's a hint. And through the legislative process, because not a lot of states have gone that route, even though we're starting to see some states go there recreationally.
The Colorado?
No. That was Amendment 20 voted on by the people. Hawaii. 16 years ago, they legislatively, without the people voting, said, you know what? We want medical marijuana. And finally, I don't know why it's taken them 16 years.
It's taken 16 years.
Those sales will start later this year, the Department of Health says down there. So nobody gets that point, but moving on. Kim, you ready? Mm-hmm. Name the California city currently hosting the acclaimed museum exhibit Altered State Marijuana in California.
Oakland.
Boom.
I was there 2
Oh,
weeks ago.
you were just there at
Awesome.
NCIA. Well done.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I wouldn't have known that otherwise. Of course.
Yeah, I didn't.
Did
know
you
that.
go?
Yeah, we did. It was really, really cool.
Oh, great.
They had a what was it called? A party to end prohibition out there, a big party at the museum. It was actually really cool.
Was it a part of an NCIA or somebody else's party? Or?
No, I'm trying to remember. It was like, Berkeley Patients Group and I believe Drug Policy Alliance.
Oh, sure.
And some of the California organizations out there. It was in conjunction with the National Cannabis Industry Association's Cannabis Summit, but it wasn't officially their event, though.
Oh, cool.
It was a really cool event. I'll have photos up soon.
One of my colleagues went, they work for the San Jose Mercury News, and we ran that story, and then we just ran another AP story, and I thought it was interesting. So if I make it out to the Bay Area, I'm definitely going over there.
Definitely go check it out. It was very interesting. I mean, especially, it was like a party at the same time, so it was even cooler.
Awesome.
Hey,
Party in a
great.
museum.
All right, next question to Jordan.
Okay.
Name one of the 2 travel guidebook companies that now include marijuana tourism information in their updated guides to Denver and Colorado.
Is it Mood Book? Is that what it's called? I just read this article because I was scrolling down the Cannabist page and I saw my company's name in the picture describing the article.
Oh, sure.
Primal Therapeutics. And I was like,
Oh, okay.
hey, that's my business, and I'm in a travel book now that I didn't know about.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Oh, the crappy picture that I took?
Yes.
Yes.
That has my company's name in it.
Nice. Well,
Was
that's
it called
good.
Mood Book?
What did you say exactly?
Mood?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Good guess. Kim?
I'm not sure.
Oh, tragic. You were so close.
Should have
Jordan.
mumbled more on the second try.
Moon.
Moon. I was so close.
Mood is the badass fabric shop in New York City where all the
Okay.
Project Runway designers go.
Okay.
Moon is the guidebook company.
Now I'll never forget.
I know, you will. Burned in your memory.
It really is.
And the other one is Foders.
Okay.
So when I wrote this, I said, hey, Moon says they're the first to do this. And then over the weekend, I was contacted by a writer friend of mine, and she said, hey, I worked on Foders, and they had it, and we published in March. So
Awesome.
there's 2 of them, and maybe more. Who knows? But good work. I'm glad that you're in there.
Yeah.
And that's your company? Is
Primal
that your
Therapeutics.
shop? Mm-hmm. Okay.
We do cannabis-infused massage. We're a mobile service.
Oh, nice. Excellent. Okay, well, that's good to know moving forward then.
Yeah.
All right. Last question of the quiz. Kim, you ready? Mm-hmm. Name the state that just added PTSD and terminal illness to its list of qualifying conditions for medical marijuana.
I know this. I just can't think of it right now.
It's been in the news the last couple weeks,
Yeah.
and this just happened. So
I don't know. I don't want to make just a random guess, and I can't recall off the top of my head. So I'm
Okay.
just going to pass it to Jordan.
Oh, goody. So I get to make the...
Jordan.
You should guess. You have a 1 in what, 26
Michigan?
chance?
Is it Michigan?
Michigan is a good geographic guess.
Fair
Not
enough.
I
quite.
am not caught up in current.
Me either.
events
This
right now.
campaign has been my entire life. I don't. If it's not the
Been a busy
campaign, I
couple
don't know.
weeks.
I don't know the answer.
Illinois.
Illinois. Okay.
If you remember, I think it was last week or the week before, where a judge came out and said, hey, I'm ruling in favor of this way, and now the state, I think they gave the state a month or 2 to add these 2 conditions, and the governor has not been wanting to expand that list at all, but added, done, and some could make the argument that in certain ways, Illinois' medical marijuana system is more accepting than Colorado's.
Right.
But, ladies, thank you so much for joining me.
you.
I want to thank my guests, Jordan Person and Kim Sidwell. Most importantly, I want to thank you all for watching and listening. I'm Ricardo Baca, joined by the whole crew, including producer Vince. Thanks so much, everybody, and we will see you next week.
I'm allowed to lose, I choose to win, I'm all in, I'm calling any posse you'll be raising at the end, I'll say it again, ain't afraid to get in, I'll be going for the jackpot with aces in my hand, I'm raw.